What is happening, guys? I'm really excited for this one. We're going to break down what CodeStrap said in Kris Patel's podcast in this video. It was like 3-4 days ago, but it took me some time to edit this thing because I had a lot of weirdly, situated excitement during that time. So I'll leave the sections in the, below so you can click through them if you're not here for my regularly scheduled idiocy. I apologize for that in advance. Comes with having severe ADHD, I guess. All right, guys, let's get this show on the road. Damn, man, I just came off of working like a 12-hour shift, pretty much dealing with idiots. Actually, before we get started, really quick, one quick way to make a lot of money in IT, by the way, is not to be the smartest guy in the room, but just be smarter than the dumbest guys in the room. Okay, that's pretty much how I get paid. But anyway, I digress. Look at these guys, man. Let's get back to the boys over here. Kris Patel, Sachin, Amit, and CodeStrap, man. I feel like, before we get started, I feel like the Palantir community has really been growing like crazy, and it's like super great. I'm super grateful to be part of this stuff. So anyway, let's get right into it. I will react to the stuff that CodeStrap was talking about and perhaps show you some code and some other stuff to back this stuff up so I can hopefully explain some of the stuff to you guys a little bit further, okay? And you got to paraphrase some of the stuff from what I say as well. But anyway, let's get into it.
All right, here's the question. CodeStrap, you've been saying you have an announcement today around Palantir. Floor is yours. What do you have to announce?
All right, so we've been talking about building this developer community and like getting this off the ground for a little while. And today I finalized the paperwork with Palantir, and I'm going to have complete access to a Foundry environment. I'm going to get to demo all these potential apps I've been wanting to build on Foundry on the channel through this Foundry in Action series.
Ooh,
it's
okay.
collaboration with Palantir. Yeah, okay. And I'm like, my first one I want to build is this custom React application built on top of a federated data kind of silo thing that we've been working on. And I'm learning so much about the platform, by the way. Like, I've been working with them pretty closely, and so they've been teaching me a lot about how to apply a lot of the things I want to, or how to build the things that I want to.
Before we continue, just so you guys know, if you're not following CodeStrap or any of these guys, CodeStrap, follow them off. Obviously, they're great members of the community, but CodeStrap is like, he has some direct dealings with people at Palantir to a certain degree. I mean, obviously we won't know that there's some things that he's working out there, but he is by far the most technical person in this community, hands down. And he really is spearheading this whole technical approach for a lot of the developers and stuff like that. So if you guys are familiar with the developing context and stuff, feel free to go check him out. He makes a lot of videos on what the differences are and stuff like that. But the fact that he's doing this stuff and he's making a series about how you can learn is amazing. It's like, this is what the developer community basically needs. You need to rally around some form of software so you can build stuff on top of it and collect feedback and that kind of stuff. So really excited so far.
I build on there. It's going to blow your minds. And it's like a true AWS replacement, by the way. Like, what? I don't ever have to think about AWS, GCP, Azure ever again to build all the apps I want to build, which is really cool. So yeah, Foundry in action. It's going to happen. It's starting next week. I'm going to start recording. And yeah, so you guys are going to get to see Foundry live. You're going to get to see real apps being built on it. You're going to learn all about it. I'm going to have a curriculum, so if you want to study more about Foundry, I'll show you where to study more about it.
Dude,
we're going to build this developer community right here. The time's now.
Right here, baby.
It's on.
We're doing this, baby. We're doing it. Dude, that is so freaking cool, man. Yeah.
So CodeStrap, I mean, there are a few things that we would like to know a lot. I mean, like, for example,
again, this is super exciting stuff, guys. Like, it's really important to understand something here, okay? The reason why a lot of developers are excited about stuff like this is because it's not very often that you get stuff from a developer first basis. We're only, progressing and moving faster into a future that is completely, software is eating everything. So you're going to need developers, on your side to actually be proponents of your software and actually get behind it and things like that. And developers are very, very natural and avid tinkerers. Like, I have multiple projects, maybe I'll show you one or something, but I have multiple projects that are running at any given time. Like, I literally don't rest. The only time I ever rest is when I hold my kids and, make them sleep and that kind of stuff. Like, outside of that, even my wife doesn't get as much attention. I'm sure she's pissed about that. But, at the end of the day, it's like, we're all tinkerers and we love to play with new tech. And this is amazing. It's like, for such a deep tech company like Palantir to be able to somehow reach into the YouTube community and provide some kind of like, olive branch to show us how things work, inform and educate us as how things go is amazing. Also, by the way, this is just a small clip. I'll post the link in the description below for the full interview. Please feel free to go check that out. But the idea is that they're pushing something where you can really get behind it. And this is, I think, really just the beginning of the ramp for, things like diversification within the platform and stuff like that. Anyway, let's get back into it.
Yeah, no, I think that's going to keep accelerating too. And like, we're already talking about how we can get other YouTubers involved, you know? So like after I get through this initial series, like
yo, CodeStrap, hit me up, man. I got some like marketing people that really want to do a lot of work. I know a lot of anyway, I'm not gonna get too into it, but hit me up, man. I want to be on this list. Guys, come on. If you guys want CyberFam to be on the list, let the boys know. Get me on that list, fellas. Come on. All right, let's go.
There's Seattle data guy. I don't know if you know who that is, but like he has some really good content he's put out. But I'm gonna try and get the platform in his hands next. And Christian from Danton's, I think is how you pronounce his channel.
Darntons. Yeah.
He's expressed some interest in getting the platform in his hands. So I'm working with Palantir to try and make that happen. Like right now, everything I just went through kind of provides like a little bit of a template to get all the paperwork done and people to sign off. And what we're trying to do is like make that into just an easily replicable process we can roll out to more YouTubers. But like to answer your first initial question, Sachin, is like, I don't know if I'm gonna have enough time to fill in the demo I wanted to do because it's literally taking me like 15 minutes to build this app that would normally take me like 2 months if I was doing it.
What?
Like on
what kind of app?
That's
it blew my mind. Like this ontology system, this is the thing. Like no one really understands how powerful this ontology system is.
Okay.
Like the way they have built it so that when you bring all these things together into an actual ontology layer, these objects are like fully indexed through Elasticsearch and Lucene, and so that you can build these really powerful. They're basically there's like an objects API that sits on top of all of them, and you can automatically search and you can start doing like real application workflows directly on top of it with zero like custom coding, right?
Elasticsearch is a bloody lifesaver, man. It's like one of the best things that you could really use as a developer for any given application, especially when it comes to searching and stuff like that. It's actually quite a problem to implement. There's different versions and stuff, so like you have to really be picky of the versions that you do. But again, Palantir is handling this on their end, which is really important because you don't have someone like mismatching versions causing some kind of like problem with your API or something like that. Plus, they handle that in the backend, so you don't have to worry about it as a customer or as somebody using the platform. But Elasticsearch, basically what it does is it takes like a large data source. It makes it really easy for you to search it. And if you could really just understand how much faster it makes it, you would not believe it. Like, I'll give you an example. I built an app on top of this Elasticsearch stuff where it would take 3 different clouds. So Azure, Microsoft, GCP, Google, and AWS. It took all of their logs, plugged it into sort of this like one central repository kind of thing. And using Elasticsearch, I was able to sort of like give my managers almost like audit logs to a point where they can search something that is like so specific, but with such generic terms. So they could search my name and it would show up with all the records that would relate to me in an instant, whereas this would have to go through like different databases. You have to do like querying languages and all sorts of crazy stupid stuff, and it would take a way longer, like at least 5 to 6 times longer.
And then to actually build the operations I want to do in my React application layer, it's just these simple TypeScript functions, and they have a whole pipeline that publishes it for you and versions it for you and does all the security management for you. So like literally like 15-20 minutes, I've got like a functional React app built on the ontology layer that's fully connected to all the operationalized data inside of Foundry, end to end, fully governed by an end-to-end security, and governance platform. So it's like,
oh shit,
kind of blew my mind. I'm like, I never want to work on AWS again. I don't ever want to work on AWS. I don't ever want to work on Azure. Like, I'll spend the rest of my career building apps on this platform. Like, it's that addictive once you get into it.
What? Wait, hold on a second. Hold on. No. Okay. Okay. So the reason why I'm so dumbfounded is because, see, within the developing like sort of ecosystem, there's a lot of things that generally slow us down. There's parts of it are for good reason, but the idea is that there's a lot of different things than just code. Okay, there's things like the code pipelines. There's how do you get the code into the destination, right? For example. But let me explain something to you. When you write a piece of code, and CodeStrap was talking about React, right? Originally, it's a library that was founded by Facebook. And they made it public, and there was a whole like kind of issue there, but whatever. They made it public, and a lot of the websites you probably see are written in React. I personally write all my websites in React. I even did a lot of mobile apps in React. I had a startup that had basically the entire mobile stack was on React Native. So I'm fairly familiar with the React and Redux and MobX and that kind of stuff. But the idea is React will provide you with like the JavaScript stuff, right? So JavaScript is, if you guys don't know, it's what helps. To simplify it, helps like the events and stuff, like when you click buttons and all this. At this point, it does a lot more than that, but just imagine that. It's more of like an actionable sort of thing, not just HTML. But The idea is that when you write this code, right, first and foremost stays and starts on your computer. You have to get that in some degree to your destination. Now, throughout this path, there's actually multiple different things that happen to this piece of code, okay? If you're looking at something like object-oriented, like C# or Java, for example, it needs to be compiled and converted into something that's more machine readable, and then that gets executed in the destination. But even that is just very simple, like it's simplifying the whole sort of process. Once you write your code, if you're part of a company, you go through this review process, like you check it into something called Git, okay, GIT, and this is basically what Microsoft bought with GitHub, okay. GitHub is basically like a store. Think of it like a locker or a bank that you put your code into, right? It's a repository. Now there's an operational layer that sits in between your code, your computer, and the destination. This operational layer is usually what causes things to take time most of the time. Like the code itself is not very difficult, guys, which is why, even if you learn how to write code, it's still a little bit tricky when you get a job because you have to learn all these other things. When you start writing code and you push the code to Git, there's a whole bunch of automation that most likely takes place. Now, some organizations are really way behind and they don't have this at all, but different softwares like GitHub itself has some, but things like Jenkins, GitLab, Bitbucket, all these people have automation built into this. So then as soon as you would check in some code, it would run some tests, basically do some quality assurance, and then move it on to the next sort of step. This whole process then goes to usually what's kind of like a review process, and then like other developers will peer review it and then check it up to the next step. And then it gets merged into that main branch. Once it gets merged into the main branch, there's another set of policies where people can say, okay, no, we're going to immediately push this into production, right? Or they might say, we're not going to do it immediately. We're going to, make this like a weekly thing where a week's worth of this exact change that I was talking about, every day people do this exact thing, right? Will go into this one sort of gold candidate, like almost like a package, and then that'll get released. So like for instance, Tesla releases their FSD, right? FSD versions. Those versions on the side, that's a version, right? So like the first number is the major version, and then minor, and so on and so forth. All of this has people involved, guys. Okay, all of these also have different platforms. After the pipeline, it goes to a different environment. It could go to AWS, GCP, Azure, different clouds, whatever the case is. So there's so many different things from between when you write your code all the way to when it actually gets executed into its destination. That's the point I was trying to make with that entire spiel, okay? Now, the exciting part is, he said basically what CodeStrap was talking about is Palantir, and Foundry specifically, does all this stuff within itself. What? and on top of that, the real kicker is he was saying that he'll never have to use AWS again. God, that is friggin' huge, okay? The whole process I just spieled out to you is just the first step. The whole second part, that's called the CI, by the way, continuous integration. There's a second part called continuous delivery, where the code that gets compiled and all that, quality assurance and happens to it, right? That has to go to the destination, like, whatever server or, wherever the destination in the cloud is. This has a whole bunch of other set of tools. A whole bunch. The point I'm trying to make is there's so many different things that are involved before it gets to the final step. And that step where it gets to the cloud is actually interesting, right? Because what ends up happening is most of the time you need to have a good level, like you need to have somebody who actually knows what they're doing for it to actually work properly, or else there's a whole bunch of problems that can happen. For instance, Terraform, if you don't do things right, you can actually delete your entire instance and you can almost never get it back unless you have somebody who's proficient enough to understand you need backups and all this other stuff. Like there's huge security flaws here. I'll give you an example. I've alluded to the fact that I helped train like this one guy who now works for like Amazon or something. He's like a total idiot, but when I trained him up, I gave him a task and he totally messed it up. But in the CI process, he basically exposed a bunch of logs and that hacked our entire system. It cost us like $70,000 in that 1 month. Like if you're an amateur, you can get burnt very fast. This is a very, very high security, high sort of like risk environment, depending on the place you work and that kind of stuff. This is actually one of the reasons why banks and stuff tend to silo their workers, because they're like, oh, if we silo you, you're not going to screw up, at the very least. Basically what CodeStrap is saying is when he creates an app, okay, he basically uploads it into something like Foundry, which has its own Git, which by the way is possible because it's open source. Anybody can do it. You can do it. I can do it. But they did it. And once it gets in there, then all that operational like loop is within that one platform. You will never have to go outside. You will never have to go to Jenkins. You will never have to go to some form of other pipeline alternative. it's all in that one platform, which is amazing because you can involve your other team members and go from there, right? You can create alerts, you can create like flags. So for instance, if something happens and your code sucks, then it can alert people from that platform. You don't have to go anywhere else. All the users are managed in one. You guys see what I'm saying here? It's actually very important. But again, not to drag on the point, but that stuff is a little bit monotonous. Now, the really crazy stuff is he's saying that he'll never have to use AWS again, like I was telling you about before. HashiCorp, there's been stuff like this before, but HashiCorp Terraform actually uses like AWS and GCP and Azure APIs to spin resources up. So what it would happen is, say for example, you had a website. Once you created the website, you would then have to tell like your operations team, hey, I need a server. I need a web server that has, you know, whatever, 4 gigs of RAM and like 60 gigabytes of hard disk space or something. You have certain specifications, and actually I'll show you that in a second. They would then have to use these specifications to spin up a web server. And when I mean spin up, I mean actually provision it on AWS or on Google Cloud or Azure. Okay. Now, like, this is usually like a week-long process. It goes through compliance. It goes through a bunch of different stuff. For Foundry to be looking at your application, or however it does it, it looks at it and says, yeah, you know, I think we'll just provision it ourselves. Don't worry about it. Like, what? Take this in for a second. Take this in, okay? That whole Terraform thing I was talking about, it's not new by any means. Not in Silicon Valley, of course. But everywhere else in the world, people are still ramping up from the old way of doing it, which is literally a guy goes in, or I guess a girl, whatever, lady, goes into the cloud and literally presses like fucking buttons to get the stuff up and running. Okay? So this automation is what I do for a living. Like I move them off of the button pressing over to a script or whatever the case is. And like Foundries basically has taken this upon themselves to do it in almost a dynamic way where it comes and says, okay, your application is XYZ. We'll provision the right kind of resources for you. Don't worry about it. Have a seat. That is amazing, man. Like for me, people can be like, oh, it's going to take my job. No, I can focus on other things like security. I can focus on other things like building pipelines. There's so many different things that I could do. It makes me more efficient. You guys see what I'm saying? I can focus on the bigger picture stuff. Like this, oh my God. Like, here, let me show you some code. I think it'll be easier if I show you some code. God damn, this is so exciting. Give me 1 second. I'm just gonna scrub some stuff so you guys don't like book me for where I work or whatever. I can show you the code. Ooh, I can show you the code. Line by line we will wander. Is that Aladdin? I think it's Aladdin, right? Over, sideways, and under. If you look at it, you'll find a whole new bug.
Who watches your shit?
My friends do. I have friends, okay? Alright, okay. This, what I'm showing you, is basically Terraform code. This is deploying stuff to Google Cloud, okay? Now, on the left here is basically security policy. In the middle here is deploying a project, like the entire project. And on the right here is deploying some networking. Just very simple stuff, okay? I'm not exposing too much here. But look at this stuff. It's literally like, you know, this is jargon, and it's crazy because this is for a simple project. This policy on the left side, even this people don't know how to do yet. Like, this is why I talk about the fact that Palantir is so far ahead. Like, they're thinking so far into the future. But guys, this stuff takes me maybe like 10 minutes to do, but it takes me 2, 3, 4 weeks to explain to people. Okay? Like, you guys, it's literally like 7 lines. But again, this stuff is very dangerous. Like, if you don't know what you're doing, you could destroy resources, get fired, or, you know, in some cases get sued as well, depending on how you work and where you work and, you know, what kind of field you're in. So it's very, very important. What CodeStrap is saying is there's a potential that Foundry has taken this kind of business logic and looped it into their operations process, which, if dynamic, and I don't know this, right? I mean, I'll talk to him and find out. But if dynamic is like, oh my God, it's basically going to provision you something into where you want based on what you need, rather than you having to manually specify it to some guy to like sit there and argue with you back and forth and go through compliance and all this other stuff. Like, it's taken care of, guys. This is going to cut like months. I don't even understand. I think it's over. I think it's over. Yeah. Palantir is going to be the platform, and I had a feeling about this from the start. I was always skeptical. And this is, if this is true, and it is as dynamic as CodeStrap is implying, and I'll take a look further, of course. But if that is the case, guys, I'm telling you right now, when this actually gets into people's hands, into smart people's hands. Because see, this is the problem, okay? If you give it to people, like, for example, the folks that I train, no offense. If you're watching this, I'm really sorry. You know I tell you this shit from day one, okay? But if you give it to some of the people like the ones I train and some other folks that are in the industry, they won't understand it. They're probably, they'll need like, months, if not quarters full of training, and they'll still suck. Mainly because they're just doing a job. But if you're giving it to somebody who's passionate about what they're doing, I'm not that passionate, but I'm fairly passionate. Somebody like CodeStrap and these people, they will build something where people will be like, how in God's name did you do that? And they're actually going to provide an actual advantage to the business that they work at. God damn it, man. Oh, goddamn excited. Like, oh my God. I don't know. I don't even know what to do anymore, but there's nothing that compares to this in the market right now. Zero. There is nothing, guys. Okay? I don't even know. You guys have a nice day.